keep this in mind. The Suns have been bad for 10 years. When you're bad for 10 years, what happens? You get a lot of high draft picks. This team could be a lot better, Michael Kaskey-Blomain, CBS Sports. They really could be a lot better. They missed on a lot of draft picks themselves. Where they hit on was not the high. They missed on number 4 multiple times. They had Josh Jackson miss. They took Dragon Bender, another miss. They hit the 13th pick a couple of years ago. I can't even remember that guy's name. Not in the league anymore. Miss. The one they hit on was number 13, Devin Booker. They had the number 1 pick. They got DeAndre Ayton. And then they kind of tied it all together when they got Chris Paul. So what's a better story? Phoenix winning the championship this year or Milwaukee winning the championship this year?
That's a tough question, Mike. I think obviously it probably depends on which fan base you ask. But, I think it's just cool that it's going to be a fresh franchise either way. Obviously, the Suns have never won one. Bucks haven't won one since the early 70s. So, both teams obviously have gone through a big drought. It'll be cool to see, some new teams in there. I think, the Suns story is a pretty unique one because they went from, obviously not being in the playoffs for a decade, being pretty, consistently near the bottom of the standings in the West, like you alluded to just now. I think that's a little bit more rare than what you're seeing with the Bucks, which is obviously a team that has, got to the playoffs the past several years, hit a few roadblocks, had to overcome some adversity, and finally they were able to get through. That's kind of, something we've seen over and over again. But in terms of the Suns, it's really rare that you see a team go from, being basically at the bottom of the West and out of the playoffs for a decade straight to then all of a sudden they're competing for a title. So I guess I would lean toward the Suns slightly.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary to think about how much better this Suns team could really be if they had hit on a lot of their picks. I mean, they missed a lot. This is a franchise, Michael, that was regarded as one of the worst. I mean, their ownership group was mocked a lot and talked about how bad of a situation it was to play there. As we mentioned, they missed on a lot of draft picks, and then look, they haven't been good really in 10 years. I mean, this hasn't been a good team that's been kind of building their way up. They went from not being a playoff team. It was really last year in that bubble when things kind of changed for them.
Yeah, I think last year, like you said, in that bubble, they won all 8 of the games that they played down there, and they showed some the bubble basically felt like the playoffs, even when it was just those regular season games. Everyone was watching it. The teams that were there were all in contention for a playoff spot. And I think you finally got to see some of those young guys that kind of got a taste of that atmosphere. Obviously, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, they stepped up and they weren't able to make it to the playoffs at that time. But then obviously you add that experience and add in a guy like Chris Paul, and just all the factors kind of came together at the right time. Obviously, I think we'd be remiss not to acknowledge the fact that, they definitely were on the receiving end of some good luck in these playoffs. And who knows how the Lakers series would have turned out if Anthony Davis remained healthy. Who knows how that Clippers series plays out if Kawhi gets to play. But overall, I think the fact that the Suns were able to, so quickly turn things around, really it's a positive sign for, all of them, the young guys, Chris Paul, the coaching staff. It's just, a good story for that team for sure.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain covers the NBA for CBS Sports and the Sixers. And has since 2009. So obviously you look at the finals here and you take a look at this one. Giannis, we don't know if he's going to play. He has been upgraded to questionable, but is he the difference maker on who wins this series? In other words, if Giannis plays, do the Bucks win? If Giannis doesn't play, do the Suns, or do you like the Suns no matter what?
No, I think Giannis's health is a huge factor, Mike. I think if he plays, and obviously, if he plays is one thing, but for him to play, he has to be, he can't be like we saw James Harden in that second round series where, yeah, he was playing, but he wasn't actually James Harden. I think, obviously Giannis needs to play, and he needs to be, if not at 100%, really close to himself, and mainly just putting pressure on Phoenix's defense consistently, because I do think he's a matchup issue for Phoenix if he's out there. They don't really have, a guy. I'm sure they'll probably throw Jay Crowder at him. They'll probably try to use DeAndre Ayton on him at times, but he presents a mismatch for them in my eyes. And I think if he plays and he's healthy, this one has potential to go 7 games. Whereas, if he's out there, not only the Suns would they continue their streak of super good luck, but I think they'd be able to, take care of Milwaukee pretty easily at that point.
All right. So Giannis, obviously, big factor here. Look about Drew Holiday. Let's talk about Drew Holiday and Chris Paul and how that matchup really will factor into this championship.
Yeah, I think that's obviously going to be, a key one, Mike. I think Drew was huge in that last series, obviously, and he's basically been huge since that's pretty much why Milwaukee brought him in. He's not only a great perimeter defender, but he's also a guy that they've relied on heavily to get buckets down the stretch, and he's a guy that can, make Chris Paul work on the defensive end too. He's really good at using his size, getting guys in the post, taking advantage of his size down there. So he'll be making Chris work on both ends of the floor. And, technically they could put him on Devin Booker at times if they wanted to switch things up. If Booker was going off, he has the length and the athleticism to, really give a guy like Booker a hard time. So to me, Holiday, especially if Giannis is unable to play or if he's not near at 100%, I think Drew's the X factor that if he kind of is unleashed and continues to play aggressive like we saw toward the end of that Hawks series when Giannis was sidelined, he could definitely be the X factor and could, even potentially keep the series somewhat interesting even if Giannis is out.
Yeah, I'm interested, too, if Giannis plays, who defends him? Do they go with DeAndre Ayton? I mean, that to me is another situation there when you look at matchups. Another matchup would be, the Bucks like that drop coverage, and the Suns are a great pick-and-roll team. Brook Lopez was getting pick-and-rolled to death early in that series against the Hawks, and they were able to kind of overcome it. So you wonder how the Bucks defend the Suns pick-and-roll.
Yeah, I think, like you said, that will be a huge thing because so much of Phoenix's offense is predicated on running that action. They do it arguably better than any team in the league, and they did throughout the regular season. They have a lot of good, secondary action off that in terms of rollers. They run the Spain pick and roll to perfection, which is basically when a guy sets a screen for the initial guy that set a screen when he's rolling to the rim to kind of free up the lob pass. They have shooters, obviously Mikal Bridges, Booker, other guys that are, space the floor when you have Chris Paul in that action. So it'll be interesting to see, Mike Budenholzer, one thing he's been criticized for in the past has been being a little bit slow to make adjustments in these playoff series. He's obviously fond of the drop coverage, like you mentioned, especially when Brook Lopez is in there. And you would assume that Phoenix obviously knows that and is going to look to exploit it. So I think that'll be one of the interesting parts of the chess match between the coaches to see, if Phoenix relies on that heavily, and if they do, how the Budenholzer and the Bucks kind of are able to adjust and adapt to, even the thing moving forward.
NBA Finals tonight here on 97.3 ESPN. I think one of the interesting stories about the Bucks, Michael, has been they have not shot well from three, and here they are. I mean, they're only shooting 31% from three, and here they are in the finals. I don't know if that says more about the injury situations in the East or that the Bucks can beat you in a variety of ways.
Yeah, I think if you're the Bucks, you would probably, obviously it's not a great stat to show how you've played, but I think you probably feel pretty good about that. Like you said, the fact that they're able to advance 3 rounds and get to the finals, despite the fact that, one of their biggest weapons during the regular season wasn't at the peak of its powers in the playoffs. But to me, the Bucks are, an interesting team because they can play a multitude of ways. They have a lot of size in the front line. I think they took advantage of that well in the closing out the Hawks the last couple games. When you're talking about, Lopez, Middleton, Giannis, although he was out, they have a lot of size, and PJ Tucker obviously in that front court, and they have the guys that can shoot. So to me, they can beat you in a multitude of ways, and I think that obviously that's going to work to their advantage in this series.
MKB, Booker, Middleton. Could that be the difference? Who of that group steps out? Because you got Giannis, don't know, Paul, we think. But Booker versus Middleton, they're the number 2 guys in this series. So which of those guys do you like?
I think you got to go with Booker in that situation, Mike. I've been really impressed. Obviously, Middleton's been around in the playoffs a few times, and he's been great in these playoffs, but he still has shown flashes of inconsistency. He'll have a big second half, but he's kind of MIA in the first half of some games. To me, I've just been really impressed with the way that Devin Booker has responded in these first playoffs. He's obviously, a legitimate star, a guy that can get you a basket at any time. And he doesn't seem to me to be the type of the guy that's going to shy away from the moment in the finals. But, it's going to be the opposite situation. I think he's really going to embrace the spotlight and the big stage and elevate his game. So to me, I think, obviously there's a bunch of keys for each team. But for me, if I'm the Bucks, making sure that, you can't stop Devin Booker, but containing him, making his shots difficult so that he doesn't see a lot of, shots go through the basket early on, and not letting him get, any good, easy open looks from the perimeter should be one of the top keys for them if they want to win this series.
Yeah, this one interesting because I think Booker is, if they win a title here, he puts himself in another category, right? I mean, he is one of those young guys that you're just kind of waiting to see who's that next group after the LeBrons and the Durants and the Currys and all those guys that were perceived as you need to have one of those guys to win a title. Can Booker kind of elevate him to another level by winning this title here and possibly even being like the MVP of this series.
Yeah, for sure, Mike, absolutely. And I think for him it's great because we heard a lot, he's been known for a while as a good player in the league, but there was a lot of discussion about him having empty stats or, being a guy that couldn't necessarily, contribute to a winning team. He was just a guy that put up numbers. And I think it's pretty cool to see that, you give him one, a great player like Chris Paul, you bring in a good coach and a couple things, and he immediately, those empty stats become stats on a team that's all the way in the finals. So I think he's, like you said, he's really next in line. That you've heard comparisons. He's been compared to Kobe, obviously, other things like that. And I think, it's one thing when you're doing it in the regular season, but when you've been able to do it, throughout the 3 playoff series and all the way into the finals, you're already establishing yourself as that class of superstar that can get it done in the postseason. And if Phoenix, like you said, if they can go on to win, if they do win, there's a great chance, it could be Chris Paul, but there's a great chance that Booker would be the finals MVP based on, how important he's been to that team all year. And, at that point, you're in another stratosphere as a star player if that happens.
All right, let's shift some gears over back to Philly here and see what's happening. There has been some rumors that the Sixers have already turned down deals involving Ben Simmons, one of which Malcolm Brogdon and a first-round pick. Apparently the Sixers quickly turned that down, and according to a report that they would only trade him for an all-star caliber player. Chris Mannix was on the Ringer podcast with Bill Simmons, and he says he's hearing from executives that they think that Ben Simmons' trade value is actually higher than what is being publicly portrayed. So where do we think this whole Ben Simmons on the trade market, the fact that there are some teams already interested, is that a good sign for Philly if they want to try to move him?
Yeah, definitely, Mike. I think it's a good sign for Philly. And for me, I've basically heard the same thing since the season ended consistently, is that, his trade value is still there, especially, it's higher than what you would think hearing, people in Philly or reading Twitter in Philly for sure. There's obviously, a little bit of skepticism after the way he played in the postseason. But I think, teams look at the thing strategically, and you're still looking at, a player that's under 25 with, I don't need to go through his credentials, but the skill set and the defensive ability that he has. And I think there's just a belief that he can straighten things out, at least in terms of the confidence and the free throw shooting, which, that in of itself would be a big step for him. So I think that, there is definitely a pretty decent market value for him and interest in him out there. But I don't know how much that really matters for the Sixers because it's still a situation where it's basically a star player or bust. This isn't, if this was a couple years ago when we were talking and we're still in the process years and the Sixers would be willing to take on, draft picks or unproven, promising young players for a guy like Simmons. That's not the situation now. They've finished, they got to the second round, Game 7 twice in the last 3 years. Joel was runner-up to the MVP. I mean, they're as much in win now mode as you can be, and that it really severely limits the options for a potential trade because at that point the only trade you really want to make is for a superstar guy. There's a couple options, obviously the Dame Lillard trade potential. A guy like Bradley Beal, maybe something like that. But other than that, a move like you mentioned, the Malcolm Brogdon and a first-round pick. Saw something from the Golden State Warriors. They have a couple first-round picks. That coupled with, a guy like Andrew Wiggins, something like that is just not going to, move the needle for the Sixers because they have to, decide whatever they get back. It has to be a player that's going to immediately not only, step in, but if you're going to trade Ben Simmons, you want someone coming back that's going to make the team markedly better immediately. And there's just, not a whole lot of players like that available on the market at any given time.
Yeah, I know that I saw the one from Golden State. Somebody asked me Wiseman, Wiggins, and the number 7 pick. The problem is I don't see Wiseman and Embiid coexisting.
Yeah, and even if they did, Mike, I think Wiseman's still a couple. I liked him as a rookie. He showed a lot of flashes, but I think he's still a couple years away from contributing to a championship level team at a reliable level. Even if I also have concerns about how those two would fit, but even if they potentially could fit together, I just don't think he's ready to contribute at the level that the Sixers need. And that's I don't want to call it an issue, but I think that's the thing the Sixers are going to run into a lot in a lot of these trades. A lot of the teams that would probably be interested in Ben are the teams that are kind of building up themselves and are, looking to move on, unproven players or looking to move some draft picks as opposed to teams that already have star players and are looking to add Ben. I think the number of that, it's just, it's going to be tough.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain, the NBA Finals tonight. And if real quick, I wanted to ask you about I saw your story yesterday about the Wizards vacancy. I guess Sam Cassell is not among the finalists there, right?
Nah, he was in the talked about for that first batch, but he's not coming back for a second interview with them.
Okay, so I was looking at that and wondering, like, he had a big impact apparently on Simmons. If he left for a head coaching job, would Simmons be more apt to be like, hey, he was a guy that I really connected with. If he's not here, I don't want to say he would be pushing for his way out as well, but I was wondering, would that relationship impact the Sixers even say, look, if Cassell's not here to work with them, that might be a problem.
Yeah, I think that is definitely a case. Like you said, I don't know how much that would have impacted him if Sam did left, but I think the fact that, so far all signs point to him remaining in Philly is a solid sign if they do potentially bring Ben back. Like you said, those two definitely, developed a solid relationship over the year. Ben mentioned a couple times during the season how much he appreciated and how much he enjoyed, working with Sam and developing his game that way. So I think that's, given the fact that there's a big possibility that he remains with the Sixers, I think that Sam still being on the coaching staff is a positive for sure.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain, at the Real Mike KB on Twitter for the NBA Finals. And your official pick is?
So, for tonight, I'm going to go with Phoenix. My official pick through work was Milwaukee in 7, with the caveat that Giannis is, healthy enough to make a difference. If not, obviously you're going Phoenix in probably 5 or 6. All
right. MKB will be back on Tuesday next week as we look at the NBA Finals. And by next Tuesday, if there is a game, it would be game number 6. So we'll hope that it gets to that point. We love to see a 7-game series when the home team's not involved. MKB, take care, man.
All right, Mike, take it easy.